Welcome to our third video about .NET MAUI basics. In this video, we are going to be talking about collection views. So anytime you have a collection of data, a list of airports, a list of movies, a list of errands, you need some way to be able to display them, and that's what a collection view is for. A collection view has two key properties. First of all, you have to say where it's going to get its items from, the items that it's going to display. That comes from item source. It's a collection of items. This could be a list of movies or a list of airports or a list of errands. It could be also something called an observable collection that we'll get to in a bit. Once you've established what you're going to be displaying and where those items are coming from, you then have to specify how those items are going to be laid out. So for each cell, you specify that using an item template. You can set the item source and items template in XAML or in code. We're going to be doing it in XAML. Two other important properties. When you tap on an item, the collection view knows which item has been selected, and that's in the selected item property. It also knows the number of that item. We're numbering at 0 as usual, and so you have what's called the selected item index. Now let's take a look at an example. We are going to be modeling movies. So the fundamental object that we need in this example is a movie. And then we're going to need our user interface, which we are going to create in XAML, and we're going to include a collection view to display our movies. We're going to have a business logic layer, just like you've been working with, and we are going to have a database layer. It's either going to be based on a list of movie or an observable collection of movie. You'll see why we've got two choices here later. And then what we need to do is we need to bind the collection view to the business logic layer so that the collection view has access to the business logic, which will have access to the database. So this is quite complicated. So hopefully this will make sense. If not, as always, you can ask questions about it. So first, we have to create a movie. So a movie's got a number of different properties. The IMDb ID, the title, the number of stars, and the year it was released. Each one of these are, I said that these were properties. These are actually the fields, the backing fields. The properties are here, of course, with capital letters. That's the naming convention that we're going to be using. And so there's really not a lot happening here, but we're going to put this in a namespace called model. So we're going to have movieextravaganza.model. We're going to try and keep all of our model and related classes here. The UI is just going to be sort of in the root level of the project. Then we're going to create our user interface. Now this is going to get a little complicated. All right, so let's see what's going on here. We have a content page. And here's the X class. This is the name of the C# class, movieextravaganza.mainPage, which is extending content page. And we have to specify that in the content page. And then we have our scroll view. And then we start off with a label that says movies. So it's right up here. Let me bring up my screen brush so I can do a little bit of doodling here. So we've got our movies right here. And then we have our collection view. The name of the collection view, it's sort of boring, is called CV. And it gets its item source from a binding to movies. So this is going to get a little complicated, but the business logic, we specify this X data type. This is the data type of an object that we can bind to, that we can connect to. This business logic object has a property called movies. It's a list. And therefore, we are able to access the movies property of the business logic class right here in XAML. It's pretty amazing. This will make more sense once we take a look at the business logic, but just know it's getting it from a bunch of movies in the business logic class. Selection mode is single. We can only select one row at a time. Now we specify the item template. That is the layout of items. And to specify the item template, we have to provide it with what's called a data template. So a data template is a way of specifying how things can get laid out, and we provide that to the CollectionViews item template. Our data template specifies a grid with 1 row and 4 columns, and these give you the proportions, and then we're going to specify the labels. Now the content of the label, once again, is not specified here, but we are binding to something else. So when we specify that we are binding to a collection here, what happens magically behind the scenes is each item of the collection is bound to here. So since one movie has a title, we can display that movie here. We are binding to the title of the particular movie that is being displayed. We can do the same with the year and the number of stars. We also have a button that is associated with a method called delete movie clicked, and it's got an image source trash.png. That's where you're seeing the little trash can right here. After we finish defining the collection view, we've got our closing element right here, our closing tag right here. We then have another grid, and we are going to specify 4 entries because we need to be able to get the ID, the title of the year, and the number of stars. Beneath that, we're going to have 2 buttons, one to add a movie, one to edit a movie. And these are the methods that are going to be called. I realized in describing this that this is very complicated. My advice here is don't panic. This will become clear as you work with this. You're seeing this for the very first time. Naturally, there's a little bit of uncertainty and possible confusion here, but hopefully this will start to make sense. All right, so we've seen the main page XAML. This is the XAML here. Now we have to look at the code behind. There's our add movie clicked, our delete movie clicked, and our edit movie clicked. What we're going to do here is we are going to talk to the business logic layer. Okay, so our business logic is in a class called MAUI program.businesslogic. This is the business logic layer. We haven't talked in detail about it, but business logic knows how to add a movie. You give it the text of the ID, the title, the year, and the number of stars, and it will attempt to add the movie there. Same with delete movie. When you want to delete a movie, you use the current movie's IMDb ID, the current movie's ID, and this will delete the movie. And this is how you can edit the movie. So again, we're going to rely on the business logic to do the hard work. We're specifying here in code, we are specifying the binding context. So this is where the XAML now knows that it has full access to the public properties of this class. We haven't talked about business logic yet, but we will. Oh, and we're going to do it right now. So here is the business logic layer. The business logic layer has access to a database. It also has, all right, I'm going to use not a list of movies. I'm going to have what's called an observable collection. This is still a collection. It still works like a list. You can access the elements individually. They're indexed. But it's an observable collection, and there's a really good reason for that, which we'll get to eventually. And all that you do when you ask, so this is a property, right? So we've got a property here called movies. All this property does is it talks to the database, and it returns a method in the database class called select all movies. Where's this database coming from? We're actually instantiating it right here. So we're instantiating it in the business logic layer. Maybe not ideal, but we're going to go ahead and do so. We could have used something called dependency injection. In fact, you probably did that in lab 1, but we're not going to worry about that for the moment here. Here's how we add a movie. Here's how we delete a movie. Here's how we edit a movie. And again, we do some quick checking because only add movie is, only business logic is smart enough to know whether or not the values here are going to be legitimate or not. So we pass them into strings because the user interface is just going to say, here, business logic, here's some text. Do with it what you want. And so you can see what's happening right here. We're going to make sure that we have, first of all, we have values that are non-zero, and then we are going to go ahead and tell the database to insert. Is this foolproof? Probably not, because we're going to just take that year and parse it. We should probably do some checking here first, and if anything goes wrong, we should return a value. But we've got a lot going on here anyway, so we're just going to sort of live with this. It's going to insert the movie and return true. If something else goes wrong, if the length of one of these strings is 0, it returns false. We can also return false. We should properly do this. If we can't parse, we should return false. Now again, we can only return true or false. So in lab 1, you learned that I had suggested originally that the methods be Boolean, but we could return a string, we could return an enum, we could return an int where we've decided on different numbers represent different error messages. There are all sorts of different ways of providing more information. So we can tell the user interface layer we had a problem, and not just it worked or it didn't, but what that particular problem was. All right, so that's create the business logic layer. By the way, I know this goes without saying. If you get bored, pause this, come back to it when you're refreshed. All right, so let's go here. And now, where do we make the business logic layer? We're going to put this in the what's called the MAUI program class. This is a class. This class is used to start the entire MAUI application. And we are going to make it a static object in the MAUI program class. So that means, because it's static, we can always access business logic from anywhere in our code by saying MAUI program.businesslogic. That then gets us access to this full class. In particular, it gets us access to just one property, movies, and add movie, delete movie, and edit movie. We'll be able to access that from anywhere that we need to. The database layer, honestly, there's nothing different going on here. This is the standard database. We're going when we create the database, we're going to create an observable collection, and when we select a movie by ID, we're going to iterate through it to get the movie that we're looking for. When we want to insert a movie, we're just going to put it into the collection and we're going to return true. Delete a movie, we're going to remove it and return true. Update a movie, you can see we're going to be doing this as well. Notice that we don't allow the person to update the ID. That just seems like a bad idea. Now, we're going to get into the topic of binding. All right, this is going to get a little deep. So deep, in fact, that I think I'm going to put this into a video all by itself. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Ask in class if you've got questions. The next video is going to talk about binding.